Good morning, friends. My name is Justin. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I play guitar on songs in Nashville. And today I want to talk about the time that I refused to replay some of my friends, fellow session brethren, some of their guitar parts. If you're new to the channel, thanks for coming by. I basically talk about music and guitar from the perspective of somebody who works and plays guitar on, on recordings all day. Lots of recordings that you haven't heard or you won't hear, but also some pretty big records, at least in the country and Nashville space. So welcome if you're new, and thanks for returning if you've been around for a while. Some of you have been with me from the very beginning, and it's always great to see your comments on my videos. So thanks for hanging out and sticking with me. This video is about something that's a little bit controversial in town. I don't think it's been actually resolved. I think people just found a workaround, and they just go that route. So there's two opposing camps here on sort of the ethics behind this. So the context for being asked to replace these guitar parts for my friends, this comes from basically a rule that the musicians union has. Okay, so if you're an artist and you make a record and you hire players and you do everything right through the union contracts and whatnot, if you use those tracks in your live show, you have to pay the player whose tracks you're using. And the union set that rate at $160 a show. So say you've got sort of a new country act, but I mean all the way to the top they do this. But say for sake of simplicity, you've got a new country act who can basically afford to take out like a four-piece band, right? The singer artist can play acoustic well enough to actually be in the mix that's coming out in front of house, but there's guitar, bass, drums, and keys. Well, say there's a really sort of important pedal steel part on the record, okay? What that artist is supposed to do, if they decide to play that track from the record and use it to supplement the sound of their live show, they're supposed to pay that pedal steel player $160 every show that they use his track, okay? Now, the union says that this is a great deal because it's far less money than it would cost for you to hire a pedal steel player, where you've got to pay for their travel, you got to pay for their hotel rooms. If you're doing fly dates, that's a plane ticket. There's a lot of expenses that go into bringing a human being out on the road with you when you're touring. And so if you're just using the part off the record, then how about $160? That's half of what like a low-end show pay should be, or at least it was back when I was touring. I don't know what people are going out for now. And if you're on a gig and you are making far less than that, God bless you. That's hard. And I know everybody's fighting to make a career, a viable career out of this. And I've been there. It's difficult. So the artists have been sort of blindsided by this in the past from the union, where the union will say, hey, we saw a bunch of your shows on YouTube and heard the tracks that union members played on your record that you used, so here's a bill. You used 3 union members' tracks per show, so here's a bill for $480 for your entire 80-show tour. That can get expensive, And these artists, like, some of them will just freak out, like, what? I didn't know. So I'm sure you can imagine where I'm going with this request to replay some of my friends' parts. Now, before I get into exactly what I did or what I was asked to do, we replace each other all the time in the studio, okay? There are records that I distinctly remember the session for and remember a particular song, and a particular hook would just get stuck in my head, and then that song's released and it's like, wait a minute, that's not me, that's not that hook. They made a decision after the fact to try something else, and they didn't call me to try to fix what they ended up not liking of mine. How dare they, you know? I mean, you can't look at it that way. Artists and producers and writers and production assistants, everybody, there's a huge menu of players in town, okay? And you can't get hung up on the fact that your part got replaced without you getting a chance to do what they ended up wanting, right? Sometimes when they want a different flavor, they're going to call a different player. You know, we've all got our own strengths and our own sort of identities, even though when we're playing other people's music, we try to come up with hooks that fit the song, that are unique, unique enough to these songs. A lot of, like, within a genre, things do sound pretty similar, right? And I know that's a big sticking point for a lot of people with modern country. It's the same for the blues, right? So, so it does happen, and it's not a big deal. We've all been replaced, okay? We've all heard a song come out that we remember playing on, and we hear the part, and we're like, man, that's not me. Oh, I guess they must have done something else. Like, everybody has been replaced. Your absolute favorite guitar player, the one you think is the absolute top of the heap, has been replaced, okay? In this context, back to the live usage thing that I was talking about, I didn't feel right about doing it. It didn't make sense to me. So here's what happened. I was approached, and this happened more than once, all right? This happened 3 times? I think it was 3 times. I was approached basically by the band leader of a major label country artists camp and asked if they could send me the stems from the record and just replay them. We'll pay you a solid day rate just to replay all of these. What they were trying to get around was being able to use those parts in their live show, but not having to pay the player who played on the record. Okay? So I could make a solid day rate and play some like supplemental rhythm guitars or like an ethereal slide part or some high chimey stuff that's just there to like really fill out the mix, you know. And I said no. It's like, you know, I don't feel right about it. I feel like this is a step in the wrong direction. If somebody wants to use my tracks live, I hope they don't ask one of my other friends to replay them. Maybe that's happened. Maybe other people have said yes. I think what they typically do now is that they have one of the guitar players in the touring band replay those tracks. It's just the telltale, the clue that this is what they're asking you to do without asking you to do it is can you get as close as possible to the tones and just dead copy the part, just a straight copy. When you're being asked to do that by an artist on tracks for a record that's already been made, they're wanting to use it live without having to pay anybody. And I see both sides of this debate. I can see where the union says, hey, these players, this is intellectual property. They get royalties for these things from being played on the radio. So if you're using their parts live, you've got to license it at some level, right? But I also see the perspective of the mid-level touring act who, you know, doesn't make a ton of money. He or she is out there trying to run what's basically a small business, and maybe they've had one hit or something to where they've got a really heavy touring year. Usually when you get to like the very top and you've had a ton of number ones, you don't have to tour that much. You don't have to play more than 70, 80 shows a year, you know. But this artist might be out there slugging it out, like trying to climb the ranks and playing 100, 120 shows, supporting festivals, being the direct tour support for someone in the spring, someone else in the fall. And if they've got to pay $160 to each musician whose parts they use during a show, that can really add up. My perspective on it is that it should cost a lot less, you know? it should be a welcome surprise at the end of the year to the musician who played it, and not something that's going to stretch the artist, okay? So something like $40 a show would make sense to me. And I get the union's argument. It's you're not having to take anybody out on the road, you know, and all the expenses of if you had that player in your band aren't there. I get that, but I also get from the artist's perspective that the thing to do now is to program out your entire show, to have sounds, even parts, even background vocals that are pushed from a drummer running a laptop, like running the entire show from Ableton. And country music is bled, or I guess pop has bled into country. Country's not bleeding into pop as much as the reverse, right? And there's just so much of this process that is in the box, as we say, you know. And I had a very different not perspective. I had a very different experience with the last touring gig I had. It was 5 guys on stage, and that's all you heard. We had an amazing bass player who could sing harmonies, and then it was me on electric, a drummer, a keyboard player, and then the artist. And he played acoustic so well with such great pocket and tuning that he was part of the mix. Rather than add all these extra tracks to push this full sound that really didn't match with what people were seeing on stage, we rearranged the songs and we tried different things. And, you know, he had a couple hits when I was with him. His name's David Nail. And so I would always play the hooky intro parts and like the important parts, you know, but we would try different things. We would have extended solo sections. He would leave the stage and go like, he'd go like smoke a cigarette or something backstage, and we'd be playing Green Onions or something, you know. Like it was really fun, and we kind of got to be known as the band that a lot of the other touring guys would hang out and watch from backstage, because it was kind of like an old band, you know. We didn't have a set program. You didn't know what was going to happen. So with all that said, I have a track here where I've been asked to replace somebody else's part. And again, this has happened to me, and so I'm going to replay it. The part is I'm not going to play you what they have on there. I'm going to play you what they did, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do to replace it. So I'm just gonna keep my rhythm tracks open, and I'm gonna show you what their part was. So I'm playing my Jeff Sin Telecaster, calls it a Pomona. This is a fantastic guitar. It's very mid-rangey, kind of a rock telly, alder body, giant neck. I really like this guitar a lot. And so here's the part. I'm going to turn this click down because it's going to be punishing if I don't. It always seems to be louder in the video than it is to me in the room. So here's the part. Pretty hooky, right? I think it was actually the original was sliding in. And the progression is A, E minor, G, D. So because the tonal center's A, like you might say like, well, that's in the key of D. All those chords fit with the key signature of D. I would disagree. And you know, a lot of you mode guys would say, oh, it's A mixolydian. I just call it A. It's just A. It's 1, 5 minor, flat 7, 4 in A. That's how my brain works. So. So I'm going to replay this. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to play, instead of one guitar for this part, I'm going to play two parts, and I'm going to play it on slide. So I'm going to play the same part, but it needs to be like smoother and dreamier and vibier. So I'm going to put on a little bit of a delay here. Turn the tremolo off. So let's play the top voice first, and turn the box of rock off. I've got the boost side of the Sean Tubbs Tilt on, so here we go. This is going to be the first part, and then I'm going to play the lower part and just really try to match all of the exact enunciations. Okay, let's do that harmony. This is going to be interesting. It's a wide harmony, and again, I'm going to try to get all the phrasing similar. Aside from a little fret noise at the end, I think that was really great. I'm going to play it one more time. Now, you might be hearing the same thing that I'm hearing, where the lower voice on a bigger wound string is a little bit louder. Well, the nice thing about the way that we played this on separate tracks is that I can make that track a little quieter, and they don't have to be panned as hard as they are. So